Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to part 2 of today's blog. I did tune in with you a little bit earlier, and I posed a question to everybody. That question was, did we think that the brain and the mind were the same thing? I wanted people to just take some time, even if they didn't have time to research, but just to actually think on that and think what your perception was when you think about that. Do you think that those are the same entities? Do you think they directly affect one another? Do you think that they're one and the same? Do you think that one even exists outside of the other? So I hope you did have some time just to ponder that thought. So I'm sorry I'm tuning back in so late. It was a long day, but it was a productive day with church and even being out to go out and do some things as far as ministry in the community. But today I'm returning back to my favorite spot, which is my One Day at a Time blog. And I'm here to just answer this simple question. I do have my notes here in front of me, so when I'm looking down, please excuse me for not making eye contact. But I wanted to make sure I was able to maximize on all the information that I had in this short amount of time that I can share with you. So the golden question: is the brain and the mind the same? No, they are not. Let's talk about the differences really quickly. The brain is an organ. The brain is actually a physical organ that is located inside our skull, inside of our head. Our brain is responsible for our physiological processes, meaning our breathing, the digestion of our food, our sweating, when we're cold, when we're trembling, when we're afraid, the flight or fight, is responsible for our blood pressures, is responsible for elimination of fluids and bowels. It is responsible for every physiological process that is in our body. Now, the mind is part of the invisible, transcendent world of thought, feeling, attitude, belief, and imagination. It is most associated with our actual consciousness. Most people believe the mind to just be in the brain, but the mind is really a part of everything from the tip of our head all the way to the soles of our feet. Since those two entities are so broad in themselves, I absolutely cannot speak about both of them in this one blog. So what I wanted to do was just focus in today on the brain. So let's just talk about the anatomy of the brain. The brain is at about a 3-pound organ. It controls every function of our body. It is composed of a cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. It receives information from all of our senses, which includes sight, smell, touch, and taste, and hearing. Often at the same time. It's very, very smart. It controls our thoughts, our memory, our speech, our movements of arms and legs, and the function of every organ within our body. It also determines how we respond to stressful situations, such as taking a test, losing a job, and by regulating our heart and our breathing rate. Now, there's so many topics that we could talk about with the brain and in this blog about how to achieve mental freedom. But today I wanted to talk about one term in particular with our brain, which is to me the most amazing part of our brain. And that term is called neuroplasticity. Now, of course, everything I tell you, I'm just giving you a general overview, but I encourage you when you get off this blog just to take some time and go research it yourself, because there's always more and more information that we can learn. The reason I'm talking about neuroplasticity in reference to this blog is as people that are imprisoned by our past, and imprisoned by things that have happened to us, and imprisoned by our thought processes, we need to actually understand how the brain works and how we can reverse the way our brain is currently working so that we can be free of all these bondages. So, neuroplasticity, today's word. That definition is the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. Neuroplasticity allows the neurons in the brain to compensate for injury and disease, to adjust to their activities in response to new situations or changes in their environment. The reason this is so important to us as One Day at a Time bloggers is because we are trying to reverse the damage that has been done to our brain. I'm not talking about physical damage. I'm talking about emotional damage. So a lot of us here, we have experienced, a plethora of experiences. Some of us grew up as abandoned children. Some of us were abused as children. Some of us, wives that were abused by our husbands, or husbands are abused by wives. Every time these situations happened to us, our brain formed a neural connection. And that neural connection was not a positive connection. It was a negative one. And so basically, our brain started forming negative connections. It is actually a physical, ability that our brain has. Whenever we experience something, it records it. It actually, like a computer, it stores it. It stores it in its memory, and that's the connections. It's kind of like a computer and a virus. When you put a virus in a computer, then that virus, it spreads out to everything in that computer, and it affects everything, every program that is on that computer. The same thing is with us. When we form these negative neural connections, then our brain starts firing these connections everywhere in our brain, and it affects us. And then, of course, as we talked about with our brain affecting everything, of course, we can understand how those negative connections could affect our physical health, but that's a whole nother entire blog. The point is, let's get back to neuroplasticity. The same neural connections that have been created that are negative, we can start reversing those connections and creating positive connections. That is what neuroplasticity means. We can actually reverse the damage, and we can change that damage that has been done to our brain by starting to create new positive neural connections. So for a woman that has been through severe abuse, when she is out of that situation, nothing is going to change until she actually starts putting herself in a situation where she can experience positive things, so she can start creating neural connections. So that's what we need to start doing today. We need to go out into the world, and we need to wake up with the mindset that today we're going to create new positive neural connections. Put yourself in positive environments. If you go to church, that's great. Like today, I had a great church service. I was able to put myself in a positive environment. I was fed so much positive information that my brain was recording that and creating new neural connections. Now, the good thing about the brain is those connections that we use, they get stronger and stronger and stronger. And the connections that we don't use, they eventually die off. So if you keep introducing your mind to new positive experiences, then your brain will start to create those new neural connections. And then if you deplete it of all those negative experiences, then those connections will be diminished. So the point is, you need to overflood your brain starting today with everything positive, everything. If you're in a negative situation, take yourself out. Put yourself in a positive one. Just flood your mind with those things. And I promise you that based on this term, that the brain is able to create new positive connections. It will start doing that. So I encourage you tomorrow when you wake up, if you walk into a negative environment, or if you're at work and they're having a negative conversation in the break room, then step out, because all you're doing is feeding those negative neural connections. Go somewhere, pick up a positive book, or just be your own positive energy space. Go in your car and just start saying scriptures or whatever it is that you do to create positive energy for yourself. And if you start doing this every single day and eliminating all the negativity, I absolutely promise you that you will start to feel a difference in your body and in your mind, because your brain, again, the brain is what controls all of those physiological processes in your body. So start making those positive connections. Your breathing will get better. Just your overall physical comfort, the way you feel, everything will start changing. So that again is today's blog. The word neuroplasticity. I did a very short description of it, but I encourage you to, when we get off this, to always go and read up more on what I've taught you, because I don't have a lot of time with you, but I want you to be able to understand the importance of that word. So get off this blog, go Google neuroplasticity, see how it works, and tomorrow I encourage you to immediately start that process. Tomorrow I'll tune back in with you and we'll talk a little bit more about the mind. Again, both of those are huge entities and there's so much that we're going to be able to share, but I look forward to sharing all of this information with you one day at a time. Thank you.